How you guys doing? All right, we're pretty excited for this opportunity right here. Hopefully win the first bowl game in the history of JMU. Appreciate you guys having me.
Obviously, just finding out from Coach that Billy's going to be starting, what's kind of been those conversations? What have the conversations been like with him since kind of finding out about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, right, and Coach kind of mentioned this, it's just about how you prepare. And one of the cool things about Billy is that, the quarterback's an interesting position because only one guy plays, right? You go through the board of a lot of other positions. It's not typically the case where, we roll a lot of people. Offensive line, we've rolled 9 guys. Receiver, at times, we've rolled 7 guys. Tight ends, we've rolled 4 or 5 guys. So at this position with one guy playing, right, it's really all about the preparation and really being ready for your opportunity. And the thing with Billy is, and that's what you want from a quarterback, is that you want to make sure that you prepare like you are the starter. And one of the things with him is that that's how he's done, right? Whenever his name was going to be called, right, he was ready for a multitude of different reasons in terms of, and it all goes back to in terms of how he prepares. So that conversation, obviously things change when your number is going to be called to walk out there. But I think the biggest thing is that this is just a buildup of what he's already done.
How noticeable was his maturity throughout the year as an older guy through practice and then someone who's been here for several years now?
Yeah, it's pretty evident. I think one of the big things is, it's a joke, but in the quarterback room we call him the Godfather, right? And it's kind of like all things go through him. But that's just his mantra on how he carries himself, right? He's a very mature, individual, and how he carries himself. Like, he does everything the right way, and that's what you want out of that position. And now that's just going to carry over to, the game. So, I've been pleased with him throughout the year. We come off on the sidelines. He's always probably one of the first, people, him and Dylan, that kind of come back and say, hey, I saw it this way. And he has a lot of ideas, and his ideas are really good. And I think that's the thing that you want from him and from a quarterback, is just constant communication in terms of what you like, what don't you like, and all that stuff. So that stuff has always been there throughout the year, and now it just has to continue that way.
Do you feel like the offensive identity, sort of how the offense runs, changes at all with a different quarterback starting?
Yeah, obviously, you got to make sure you play to people's strengths. So I think anytime someone's going to step foot into a starting role in any position, right, it's going to change for a multitude of different reasons. But, like always, in the past few weeks, you got to be able to run the football, right? That's obvious. You got to make sure you have your identity there, and that's got to be a big thing. But I'd say for sure, right, your identity, it might change a little bit, it might tweak a little bit, but, you still have to, at the core of who you are, be able to do the stuff that you've been doing.
How beneficial is it to have a guy like Tanner Morris when you're going through these kind of changes at quarterback? How important is it to have a 6th-year guy as center?
Yeah, it's extremely important, right? And just especially at that position where, he's snapping the football to the quarterback, I think is huge. And just the communication that you have between the quarterback and the center. There's so much stuff that happens, right? From the time that the play call is signaled in to really the time that the ball is snapped. So having really an experienced offensive line in general, not just Tanner, obviously it's huge with the center position, but having an experienced offensive line in general is always going to help, regardless of what quarterback steps back there. So I think that's a huge piece of it, right? And our offensive line has done a really good job from the communication side of things, and that has to continue to, go that way.
You already talked a little bit about running the ball. Western Kentucky's definitely given up some big plays on the ground. I'm curious what you've seen from their defense.
Yeah, I think, it's a high reward type of defense. Coach talked about, I think they pressure 57% of the time on first and second down. That's a lot, right? And, they're going to bring pressures from everywhere. There isn't a pressure that they don't have, right? And they'll bring it from the boundary, from the field, from secondary, from you name it. They're going to find a way to do it. And obviously the last game, you look at the Jacksonville State game, Jacksonville State did a really good job of running the football. So there's some stuff that you got to make sure you watch each individual game and try to, pick some things that each team kind of did well and kind of formulate your game plan that way.
When you have to make an unexpected change at quarterback, how beneficial is it having the extra practice time, the extra preparation from kind of getting everybody on the same page from a chemistry standpoint, but also as you're trying to construct a game plan?
Yeah, I think that's huge, right? That's a huge benefit for us, and probably for any team that's in that situation. There's multiple things that go into that, right? You can go at a slower pace, right? And one of the big benefits, honestly, is of how this defense is structured, of how many different things they do. is that you get more reps, right? You can rep more schemes and plays versus all their different looks that you typically couldn't do on a normal week. And then now you add that into the equation of really the chemistry side of things, of getting the offense in the right direction. And there's a lot of things. Look, like the snap count's going to be different, right? And it's only going to be different just in terms of the voice inflection. So different, reps of that, because they've been so used to Zoe's voice or whoever's voice, whatever the case may be. So there's so many other things that this just benefits this type of scenario in a good way.
You mentioned kind of how Billy has really good ideas and like he's the godfather in the room. Is there anything maybe specifically where you've kind of seen it rub off on Zoe that maybe we've seen over the course of the year?
Yeah, I think his just calm demeanor is something that I've seen rub off. And to be honest with you, probably the whole quarterback room. And as a quarterback, you have the highest of highs and you have the lowest of lows. And in that room, you got to make sure you're just kind of riding the wave and kind of staying even keeled throughout it all. And he's kind of one in my eyes that, epitomizes that. And that's one of the things that I've seen that, one of the pros that he has that has rubbed off on other quarterbacks in that room.
When you've got a quarterback that hasn't had a chance to go on the field much this season, how beneficial is it to have 3 running backs that have all sort of shown that they can get going this year?
Yeah, I think that's huge, and that's kind of been the mantra too, is just being able to sub people, as their numbers called, but really as they're getting hot, right? And when you have, I think we have 3 different running backs, 3 different styles of running backs that can kind of do a little bit of everything, and they have their own their own strengths as well. So I think that's a huge piece of it, right? Finding ways to get them the football and the stuff that fits, what they do really well.
Yeah, was Billy kind of chosen as a starter because of that calm demeanor, especially, you talking about the blitz packages that you guys could see on December 18th?
Yeah, I think, everyone's got to be ready to go. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. It's, this game is interesting just because you never know what can happen any given week. You never know. Injuries are a part of the game. They stink, right? But they are a part of the game, right? So you just always got to be ready when your number's called. And look, you've seen in other positions, a lot of people have played, in any given game from each individual position. It may be different. It may not be different in this game. We might have 2 quarterbacks play. We'll see how it's going to play out. But I think as a quarterback, as the room as a whole, we just got to be ready for every given situation.
Yeah, and finally, just like, is there any specific pros do you think about having, the game at that time, December 18th, and just with Florida? I know you guys picked up a couple of in-state recruits from that state as of late as well.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the time that you can have to practice. Then look, the more time you have, like, these practices are also great for the future of this program, right? Just in terms of the development of, the younger people on the team. So I think that's just as much of a huge piece. And there's going to be other people across the team that are going to have chances to get more reps that they typically wouldn't get in. That only is going to serve, it's going to serve them well for the future and serve us well for the future.
Speaking of younger players, can you talk about J.C. Evans a little bit and his development throughout his freshman year? Obviously, he's been in a couple spots for you guys. He's a little different player than Billy, but how about his development over the course of the year? Have you been happy with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look back, he's played in some meaningful snaps throughout the season. He came in, I think it was the 3rd play of the game against, or was the 2nd play of the game against UL Monroe. He did a really good job with what we asked him to do. And, I think when you talk about all the pros that we just talked about with Billy, you talked about Zoe's development. The cool thing for him is that he's seen, all of this from afar, right? And he's got to learn what it takes to be a quarterback at this level. He's got to learn, from the preparation side of things, what does it take to prepare the right way to be a quarterback? And I think he's done a really good job of learning and kind of just being a fly on the wall because, look, he does have older people in that room that he can rely on. And one of the proudest things that I am of that quarterback room is that at every given moment, they have always had each other's back, right? You see them when they come off the football field. Every single quarterback, like I said, is the first one there to talk to Zoe, say, hey, I saw this, what'd you see? And give different ideas. And for a younger quarterback, he has Dylan Morris in the room, right? He's been, I believe, he's 23, 24 years old. He's gone through a lot of, ups and downs in this game. And JC has learned a lot from him. JC's learned a lot from Zoe throughout this year and seeing the actual play on the field. JC's learned a lot from Billy just in terms of the maturity aspect of things that he brings to the table. So when you kind of talk about that quarterback room as a whole, right, I think he's done a really good job of kind of seeing how it should be done at this level.
Kind of the human side of things. How is Zoe doing? Obviously, this is heartbreaking for him not to be able to play in this game, getting injured. How is he?
Yeah, obviously it stinks. I think this part just speaks towards Zoe in terms of how he carries himself. After that play happened, he came off the field. I asked him how he was, and he said, I'm good. He was ready for the next overtime, right? And that just speaks, he's an individual who competes. You know, he's going to compete no matter what happens to his body, no matter what happens outside, you know. And so when you kind of look at it from that lens, just in terms of how he loves his game and how he competes, that's the part that stinks, right? And, you know, obviously we're going to be there with him, right, every step of the way. But, you know, these moments don't define you. What defines you is how you respond from those type of moments. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to with him, because I know he's going to respond the right way.
And can you just kind of, when you look back at the season that he's had, I mean, from where he began to where he's at right now, as his position coach, can you just kind of take us through just how proud you are of what he's done this year?
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to describe it, is how proud I am of him. And look, right, you know, he'll be the first one to tell you all of the, you know, the low points that he had through last year, and him having to sit on the bench after, you know, being named the starting quarterback and then respond in this manner. That just, you know, speaks volumes to how he carries himself, to who he is, right, to the core of his body. Right, and that's really the biggest thing, right? But take away the play and how well he's done on the actual football field. It's everything outside of that, right? And those are the things that's the reason he's going to be successful in everything that he does in life, is because of how he responded to those situations that didn't go in his favor. And when you really look at it from that side of things, that is really where, really, I'd say the whole coaching staff is really proud of him, right? And it just speaks volumes to who he is. And we talked about Billy in terms of the preparation, how he's always treated himself as a starting quarterback. You know, Zoe is someone who also, he prepares the right way, period. I think that's the best way to put it. He is constantly up in this office. You know, he maintains good grades. He does stuff in the community. He does everything the right way. Obviously, there's a lot of learning to do, and there's a lot of learning to do for everybody in this program. But in terms of how he carried himself when the chips weren't falling his way, that's where we're most proud of him.
All of JMU Nation should be proud of Alonzo.
I 100% agree.
And talk about Dylan. Obviously, he's gone through a lot this year, too. Flying across the country, not being able to play, or he's been injured most of the year. Can you just talk about what he's meant to that quarterback room?
Yeah, I mean, just like we talked about with Billy, just the calmness that he brings to that quarterback room, Dylan brings a lot of experience, but brings a lot of experience on top of attacking things the right way. You know, even while he was injured, he was out there in Indy. If he couldn't do that individual drill, he would be behind everybody doing it himself, right? And there are so many things that he offered to the quarterback room, just in terms of the development side of things, where you may not see it, but it rubbed off on every single quarterback in that room. You know, and Dylan wants to be a coach, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal coach when it's all said and done, just because he sees the game the right way. He understands what hard work is. He understands a lot of things of what it takes to be successful, really, in life. Any other questions? All right. Sweet. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.